Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Gary Jacob. I'm the CEO of Immuron Pharmaceuticals, and I'm here to tell you about the Immuron story. So, first of all, you'll notice from this first slide that the company is forging commercial and clinical pathways, and that's important. As a biotech company, we're not just a development stage company. In fact, we have a commercial product, and that's a key part of the Immuron story. I will be making forward-looking statements as noted on the safe harbor statement. So obviously you should be aware of that. And let's go immediately now to the key overview of Immuron, and that's shown on this particular slide. We are, as I mentioned, a commercial and a clinical stage biotech company. I think that's very important. We have a validated technology. Travelan is our flagship product. It's marketed in Australia. It's been marketed there for a number of years as a listed medicine under what's called their Therapeutics Good Administration. We also market it in the US as a dietary supplement. Now, that is very exciting because we have this technology that is unique and proprietary, and it's an important part of the company. We also, though, are a development stage company, and that's highlighted by the second bullet. We have two clinical drugs in development. One of them is referred to as IMM-124E. IMM-124E, incidentally, is Travelan. That's the product that we do already market, but we have it in development under what's called an investigational new drug application with FDA, specifically looking to prevent travelers' diarrhea, and that's a second part of the story that I'm going to tell you about this afternoon. The other drug that's in clinical development is called IMM-529, and this is specifically directed towards a major unmet medical need, C. difficile infections, which is a major source of mortality in hospitals and GI-related mortality. So we have two programs in clinical development, as well as our commercial product, Travelan. And the third bullet you see I'll highlight on this slide is a focus that we have taken to move IMM-124E forward, that's Travelan again, specifically through an FDA process to an approval as a drug that we believe will really dramatically affect our commercial sales of Travelan in the US. Now, moving to the next slide. Again, this is a overview of our development pipeline. And as you can see at the top, three green arrows represent the three geographic areas where Travelan is already marketed as a commercial product. And as I just mentioned just a moment ago, we have a two-pronged clinical development plan, highlighted by the blue and the gray arrows below. The three arrows, IMM-124E Travelan is what I call the low-lying fruit for the company. We are looking to develop that through FDA as an approved drug, and that's a key part of the Immuron story, and where we believe we can really create shareholder value. IMM-529 is our second candidate, which, as I mentioned, we're looking to treat for this major unmet medical need, recurrent C. difficile. Now, moving on to the next slide. So what is this proprietary technology that we have that I believe is the hallmark of Immuron? And that is that we basically have a non-antibiotic way to treat infectious disease. And it utilizes a herd of cattle in New Zealand. This is a herd that we use to vaccinate against a particular antigen, for example, E. coli that produce travelers' diarrhea, or C. difficile that produce this recurrent C. difficile. So we take these animals, we vaccinate them, and we collect the colostrum. Colostrum is the first milk of a pregnant cow who has just given birth, or a mother for that matter who has just given birth. And this colostrum, this milk, is highly enriched in antibodies, in polyclonal antibodies. Weight by weight, on the order of around 40% of the total weight of that dried colostrum is the antibodies. And so you generate a product that can produce a form of passive immunity. And in newborn children who have no immune system, this provides them with some protection until their own immune system develops. In our case, we collect the bovine colostrum, and we have done this for many years, incidentally, and this is a very large-scale operation. So this is a technology we have a great deal of experience as well as intellectual property around. And we use that colostrum, we flash dry it after it's filtered, and we market it then as Traveland in Australia and US and Canada to deal with this issue of diarrhea. So that's the unique technology that Immuron has and that we've had a great deal of experience with. Now, I think a strong validation of this technology is the program that we've had for the last few years with the U.S. Army, and that's highlighted on this particular slide, slide number 6. This is a collaboration. The Army was very interested in learning whether Traveland, our product that we market, had potential to protect their soldiers from the Shigella infections. It generates in these soldiers throughout the world a severe dysentery. It's called bacillary dysentery. And so we have collaborated with the Army, and they're very excited about this technology, and we're continuing to work with them. And I'll be saying a word about the animal data that we just published in a press release a few weeks ago regarding a very successful animal study that was conducted by the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research with Traveland to protect rhesus monkeys from a challenge with Shigella. And that's a program that validates the technology that I've just introduced to you. So, as I mentioned, we've been marketing this drug for some time, but in the US, it's marketed as a dietary supplement. As you can see on the left of this slide, slide number 7, that just shows you the packaging that we use for marketing in the US, Canada, and the US, and in Australia, rather. And you'll notice on the right that we actually have, with the FDA, what's called an investigation new drug status. And we use that to evaluate the Traveland IMM-124E in non-alcoholic steatohepatitis patients. There's an acronym for that, NASH patients. So we actually have this product actually in clinical development as IMM-124E, and it gave us a considerable amount of additional data in humans under a well-controlled clinical trial. And what we have decided to do is to take IMM-124E now through an FDA process to an approval to prevent traveler's diarrhea. And that's a key focus for the company moving ahead. I think most of you are aware what traveler's diarrhea is. You go to a foreign place where you are exposed to food, water, and that's not clean, and you develop a severe diarrhea as a consequence. And a major pathogen that's responsible for that are E. coli. They're called ETEC bacteria, enterotoxigenic E. coli. We vaccinate the cows against a cohort of those E. coli, generate the bovine colostrum, and that's what Traveland is. And so obviously that's a key element of the Immuron story. The other important part of this is that this is not an antibiotic, and that's been a real problem with treating people with traveler's diarrhea because of the overuse of antibiotics. And that's an important distinction that we have with our drug candidates. Now, as I mentioned, marketed this commercially, and what you see on this slide, slide number 9, is the actual growth in the market that we've sustained over the last few years. So we've been seeing a very healthy growth of Traveland, particularly as we first marketed in Australia, but over the last few years in the US, as well as just recently launched in April of this year in the Canadian market. So we're seeing an increase in the overall sales. It now is of the order of around 2 million annually per year in sales, and that number is climbing year over year. We believe, though, that with an approved drug, and they have specific claims, this could really jumpstart the sales of Traveland in the U.S., and that's a main focus of the company. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, the key element is that this is not an antibiotic. This is antibodies that are generated in milk proteins that are taken, And so it doesn't alter the microbiome, and that's been a major problem with the overuse of antibiotics. As you can see on this slide, the International Society of Travel Medicine has clearly recommended that the antibiotics not be used routinely to treat patients at high risk. And that's where we believe FDA would be very receptive to our bovine colostrum to treat people with traveler's diarrhea, and that's the focus of the company. So why are we so confident and comfortable that this will work in traveler's diarrhea? Well, there already is published work performed with Travelan. And this slide just highlights two studies that were published in the Scandinavian Journal of Gastroenterology. One was on a group of 30 patients and the other on a group of 60. And to summarize, these volunteers either took a challenge with a ETEC strain that produces diarrhea or placebo. So it was a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial. And in this trial, there was a 90% protection of individuals. And just briefly to highlight that on this slide number 12, is just a summary of one of the trials. The other trial gave virtually identical data. And what you're seeing highlighted in yellow are the 15 people who were given placebo, showing an average of 4.4 diarrhea stools versus in those who were being treated with our Travelan product during that trial, who only showed 0.4 with a very high statistical significance of 0.004. Incidentally, for those statisticians in the audience, if you have a p-value under 0.05, it's considered statistically significant. You can see how far below 0.05 we are. It's a very clear statistical significance. So very pleased with the data that have been generated already that tell us that as we move ahead with FDA on a registration trial, that we will have a high likelihood of success. Also, as I mentioned, this is just a overview of the trial that we did with the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, where they evaluated Travelan in rhesus monkeys, in 12 monkeys, 4 of which were given placebo, as opposed to the 8 animals that were on the Travelan drug candidate. And what you can see on this slide number 14, shown at the bottom are the 4 animals who, after having been on placebo for 3 days, were then given a challenge with Shigella, quickly passed away. They quickly died, as opposed to the animals who were pre-treated for 3 days with Travelan. You could see 6 out of 8 of them were protected from the Shigella challenge. The Army was so pleased with this that they provided us with 3 of their Shigella vaccine candidates that we've used to generate bovine colostrum, and they are now evaluating it in animal studies. So we're very comfortable about the expectations of what we will see in our registration trial. So the plan for IMM-124E is go through a process, and we already have that in progress with FDA, which involves a Type B meeting with FDA that we are scheduling, along with a discussion with them to go through what's called a 505(b)(2) path towards a rapid development towards an approval. And this will involve filing a new IND specifically to prevent traveler's diarrhea, and then performing a double-blinded placebo-controlled trial. And of course, with success in the trial, filing a registration package. So that's the plan with IMM-124. And why are we so excited about and really focused on doing that is the payoff in increasing the market size for Travelan in the U.S. As I mentioned, presently it is a low single-digit number. But with an approved drug that would be the only drug that has the claim of preventing traveler's diarrhea, we have a very commercial forecast of peak annual sales of over $100 million. And that would, for a small biotech company, would be a tremendous impact on the market cap of the company and value to our shareholders. And here on this slide, just to highlight that presently the FDA-approved drugs to treat traveler's diarrhea are shown in the top part of this slide. The Pepto-Bismol, Imodium. The antibiotics I mentioned, which are only used in severe cases, Cipro and rifaximin, which is approved to treat traveler's diarrhea. But there is no product out there that prevents traveler's diarrhea, and that is where, as you see on the bottom, we have Travelan that we believe would have that claim that would really be a dramatic impact for us in our sales of Travelan in the U.S. Now, the second part of our overall program is to take this technology and apply it to a major unmet medical need, and that is C. difficile. Why is C. difficile such a problem? On this slide number 19, you can see this is an area that has continued to be problematic. As I mentioned, FDA has made C. difficile infections a major unmet medical need. Presently, the overall market size is of the order of around 700 million, but by 2026 expected to grow to 1.7 billion because, in fact, we have an aging population that are continuing as they go into hospitals and nursing homes, are at risk for developing very serious C. difficile infections. And these infections are the major cause of GI associated mortality in the U.S. On the order of now over 50,000 patients are dying per year from these infections. So this is a major unmet medical need. And the real problem shown on slide 20 is this second bullet shown under the title unmet need. And that is that the standard of care is to treat patients with antibiotics, such as vancomycin, the fidaxomicin recently approved, or metronidazole. But these antibiotics, which have resulted in altering the microbiome of individuals, their bacterial flora, puts these individuals at risk for what would normally be a well-tolerated bacterium like C. difficile. And what happens, of course, is that every time you use the antibiotic, after the first treatment, when you have a second round, third round, you see increasing numbers of C. difficile infections, what we call recurrences. And this is where the FDA is really looking for something that will benefit these people because the antibiotics basically run out of gas. And that's where we believe we have an excellent opportunity with IMM 529. This is just briefly an animal model that was done by one of the leaders in the field of C. difficile, Professor Dino Lyris at Monash University in Australia. And incidentally, animal models are highly predictive in infectious conditions. So although this is a mouse, this is what we believe is a very good association with what we would anticipate seeing in humans. And what you see here is a mouse model for recurrent C. difficile, where the mice are first treated with an antibiotic for 10 days just to disturb the microbiome, putting them at risk for an infection. And then at time 0, they're given a C. difficile challenge with spores of C. difficile. And then 12 hours afterwards, they're administered vancomycin, either alone or in combination with IMM 529. And then the animals are treated with that vancomycin alone or with IMM 529 for 8 days. And then just as a human would go off an antibiotic, the animals are discontinue the vancomycin, and then they're either on the placebo of water or IMM 529. And as you can see in the next slide, slide 22, the dramatic difference. Animals that are not on an IMM 529 quickly die away after that 8-day period that they're on the antibiotic, whereas the animals that remain on IMM 529 show an excellent survival, 7 out of 9 animals. And that, we believe, is very convincing for us in terms of moving forward with FDA. And our plan is, again, to file an IND meeting with FDA, file an IND with IMM 529 to take it forward to specifically treat recurrent C. difficile. Now, IMM 529 is already in the clinic. We've had it evaluated in patients in Europe. But what we want to do, of course, is move it through a formal process with FDA. And that's a work in progress, but it's a very exciting part of the Immuron story. So just finishing up, the key milestones that we expect to really drive value for shareholders, as you can see shown on this slide, the text in black represents the prevention of traveler's diarrhea milestones that we're looking to accomplish during the remainder of 2019 and 2020. The green text specifically relates to IMM 529, C. difficile program, and the two blue texts are actually two trials that are being sponsored by the NIH, where they're evaluating IMM 124E in an alcoholic steatohepatitis, as well as in a pediatric non-alcoholic fatty liver disease indication. And those are ongoing trials that'll be reading out very soon with the ASH trial and towards the early part of 2020 with the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease trial in pediatric, in children. So this is why we're very excited. We have a number of catalysts we believe will really drive the shareholder value for Immuron. Immuron is not a company that has had much visibility in the U.S. I believe that as we make progress with this two-pronged strategy, that those of you who are following in the biotech space ought to keep your eye on Immuron, because we're very excited about our technology, and we're very excited about the opportunity of applying this technology specifically to the two areas that I've shared with you this afternoon. As you can see from this slide, I have a lot of experience in developing drugs. I'm the co-inventor of Trulance, which is presently marketed. I took Trulance through a major clinical program, raised over $500 million, and went through on the order of over 5,000 patients who were evaluated with Trulance in the clinic. We filed two NDAs with the FDA, got 2 approvals, and very successful program. And I believe that we have a great opportunity to do the same again, of course, with the Travelan and the IMM 529 drug candidates. And as you can see on the bottom, Dr. Jerry Canellis, who's our Chief Operating Officer, he manages this terrific technology over in Australia. And of course, we're looking to get greater visibility. And that's why, of course, I'm pleased to have had this opportunity to speak with you. We have also a very active board. Here I'm showing you our chairman, Dr. Roger Aston, and our executive vice chairman, Mr. Peter Anastasio. Mr. Anastasio recently bought a considerable additional holding of shares of Immuron, as well as one of our other board members, an indication of our belief in the potential of creating shareholder value. And on this last slide, just a summary of the company's cap table. And this is all converted over into the American Depository share equivalent for the company. And it's a very clean cap table, no debt. And so it's a very exciting time for the company. Again, thank you for your attention. And now we're going to go over to the Q&A session.
Okay, we're now opening the line for our Q&A session. If you do have any questions, please just click the submit question icon and type your questions in, and we'll get to those in the order that they do come in. With us today, we have Gary Jacobs, CEO. Welcome, Gary.
Good morning, Paul.
Very, very glad to have you here. A lot of great things going on, obviously. You covered a lot of information in the presentation. So we'll just jump right into the questions, though. Several have come in already. Our first question, regarding the IMM 529 study results, is there a way that you'll be able to enhance survival rate up to 100%?
Well, of course, that's always the goal, Paul, in any endeavor with human disease. We certainly can't predict what you're going to see clinically when you are evaluating a drug for an indication like recurrent C. difficile. Certainly, we believe that our IMM 529 is going to have a significant benefit. And of course, you see that when you do highly controlled clinical placebo-controlled trials. So the goal, of course, is to cure everyone in every disease. We'd be very pleased to benefit a significant percentage of them. And that's, of course, what's needed in order to meet an approval from FDA. So 100% is a tough target to make in any disease, but we'll do our best.
Very good. Thank you for that, Gary. And you just mentioned FDA at the end of that. We've actually had a few questions. Questions are around the timeline towards the approval process and how the trial results are being incorporated into that.
Sure, and I'm sure, Paul, this is with respect to IMM 124E as a drug that we are looking to develop with FDA for an approval to specifically prevent traveler's diarrhea. So, as I've indicated during the presentation, we are scheduled to have a Type B meeting with FDA, and that's planned for this autumn. And of course, that's a very important step for us. We have already considerable clinical data with IMM 124E, as I've mentioned before, from an earlier NASH trial, as well as challenge studies that have been done with IMM 124E, which incidentally is Travelan, the flagship product that we actually market. So we have great experience. We are fully expecting a positive feedback from FDA because this is an unmet medical need, preventing traveler's diarrhea. Antibiotics are used when you have traveler's diarrhea. So that meeting in the autumn is very important for us. Our expectation would be a buy-in from FDA, and then, of course, in 2020, we'd be looking to do the phase 3 registration trial that would support an NDA filing with FDA for an approval. And so we'll be looking at conducting what would be a fairly short trial in 2020, looking to get that trial underway probably around the second quarter of 2020, with readout towards the autumn of 2020, and then looking to quickly move ahead with hopefully a registration package to FDA by early 2021.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. And on the same subject, as you near FDA approval, will you be ramping up the marketing of Travelan, the IMM 124E?
Certainly, the fact that we will have an approved drug with specific claims, in particular the claim that this product actually prevents traveler's diarrhea, is going to be a dramatic change in how we'll be able to market this, particularly in the U.S., where it is presently marketed as a dietary supplement. We've been very successful, and in fact, we announced early this week, of course, on July the 16th, we actually announced that we were very pleased with the revenue surge that we saw with our North American sales of 50%, over 50% year over year in revenue that we generated in the U.S. But we believe we can do far better once we have an approved drug, because in the U.S. that enables us, as we're dealing with our travel medicine clinics and the opportunities that we see with e-commerce business based marketing, that we can really ramp up the sales of Travelan effectively with an approved drug that is FDA approved.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. And we have another question on Travelan itself, as far as marketing outside of the U.S. and where do you have any plans to expand Travelan sales into other regions while you're working through this FDA approval process?
So, Paul, that's an excellent question. And, of course, as I'm sure all of the participants are aware, we are marketing now in North America, U.S., and Canada, as well, of course, as for a considerable time in Australia. We are looking at other geographic locations where we believe that this product has real potential. That will be something that we'll be looking at from the standpoint of an ongoing expansion of sales to areas where we believe Travelan can really create a real market. So that's something that is under consideration at the board level.
Very good. Thank you. And our next question, I guess back to the IMM 124E and the FDA approval. Is there plans possibly to partner with a major pharma for marketing and distribution once you go into the approval stage?
So that's, of course, something that we believe will really benefit having an approved drug. I'm sure many of the participants in this webinar are aware that dietary supplements are coming under additional scrutiny by FDA regarding marketing. And this is something that is going to be, I believe, increasing over time. We see a real benefit in getting IMM 124 approved as a drug that we can then market effectively with claims that are backed by well-controlled clinical trials. So that is our strategy, and we believe that that's the first step in really expanding the commercial footprint for Travelan as an approved drug.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. And our next question. Can you talk a little bit about your latest public offering and how you plan to put that capital to use?
So obviously, you're aware of just the last couple of days. We did announce that we were very pleased with revenue that we had generated during the calendar year of 2019. Incidentally, for Immuron, the calendar year goes from end of June 2018 to end of June 2019. That's what we refer to the revenue for the year of 2019, even though it's only halfway through this year. So with that, of course, we then saw a very healthy response to the news, and we believe that it was in our best interest to take advantage of that to fill out the remaining ADS shares that we had available. And that was announced just actually yesterday on July 17th, where we priced a public offering of 339,000 American depository shares, which we expect will generate us approximately $1.35 million US that we can add to our balance sheet. And of course, this is just going to give us some extra little room to help us as we move ahead with our strategy, which I've made clear from the webinar presentation. And we just felt that this was an opportunity to give us an extra bit of comfort on our balance sheet. It's not a very large raise. There's not really much dilution there at all. Our actual total number of shares all converted to ADS is 6.23 million, with that addition of the extra 339,000 ADS shares that were priced in that public offering. So the use of proceeds will, in fact, not alter from what we actually had stated clearly in our prospectus in the late May financing that raised $2 million. So we're very comfortable now with what we have on our balance sheet, and for us, it's full speed ahead in executing on what we've telling our shareholders are going to generate shareholder value.
Very good, Gary. And sort of a related question to that, will you be needing to raise any additional capital to meet needs over the next 12 to 18 months?
Well, at this particular point in time, we feel very comfortable with what we have on our balance sheet. I think any biotech company knows that developing drugs take a considerable period of time, and the capital is what's needed in order to create shareholder value. It's a very important element. No shareholder likes to see dilution of shares from financings. At the same time, without capital, you can't create shareholder value. So looking out at financings over an 18-month period of time, Paul, is always difficult to make clear pronouncements that you will do or you won't. We're comfortable with what we have on our balance sheet right now. We believe that we have great opportunity to create real value for our shareholders. And we, as a board, I can tell you, we're always mindful of the shareholders' concerns. It's a balancing act between what you need in capital to get you to very important catalysts, and at the same time, one must be prudent in how one affects that. So at this point in time, we're very comfortable with what we have on our balance sheet.
Very good. Thank you. And our next question, can you talk a little bit about the ASH trial results and when they might be released?
Sure. So I think it's important for investors to know that that trial is sponsored by the NIH, as I mentioned. I believe I mentioned the webinar. So we provided the drug product for the NIH to conduct that trial. It was conducted. The principal investigator is a well-known clinician in the NASH space, Arun Sanyal. We know that the database has been locked. All of the patients had been completed. We are aware that based on feedback that the release of data on that ASH trial should be imminent. Sometime, we believe, towards perhaps the end of this month or into sometime in August. But we aren't controlling that data. But it should be happening fairly soon.
Very good. And that was actually our last submitted question. There's a lot of information obviously covered here in the presentation and the Q&A. So just kind of in summary, I mean, what's the key takeaway? Why should investors take interest today?
Paul, I think you would be aware that based on the presentation I gave, this is a brand new day for Immuron. I came on board as CEO last November. I see a great opportunity to create real value with this technology platform, and we're very focused at the same time. That's a lesson I've learned from my experiences in running biotech companies. We need to be laser focused. We believe that we have a great opportunity to expand sales of Travelan considerably with a very straightforward clinical development of IMM-124E, which will put us in a position to generate considerable revenue, which is a great thing for a biotech company of our size. To have that kind of revenue, it in fact minimizes dilution from the need to go out to raise capital from investors. And at the same time, we believe we have an excellent opportunity in a major unmet medical need, that is to say recurrent C. difficile with a non-antibiotic. That is another important point that I've stressed during the webinar presentation, that this is an approach that we believe is going to be very well received by FDA, and we believe that shareholders should recognize that in the environment that we're living in with superbugs, with the antibiotics that no longer are effective, having a means, this hyperimmune bovine colostrum technology to address infectious diseases is a great opportunity for us, and we believe for shareholders who are presently in our story, and we believe for future shareholders. So it's an exciting time for us, and we're really looking forward to what we can really create with this amazing technology.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. And a lot of great things definitely to look forward to here for our audience. If you want to keep track of all these developments as they happen, make sure you sign up for news alerts. You can do that right here on the webinar page. And that way you're one of the first to hear the developments as they happen. And with that, again, this was Immuron, ticker symbol IMRN on the NASDAQ. It is dual listed on the ASX. And again, we were just speaking with Gary Jacobs, CEO. Gary, again, once again, thank you for giving us some time today, and look forward to hearing some of the positive developments as they happen.
My pleasure, Paul, and have a good day. Thanks, everyone.
You as well. Thank you.